The fall from grace. The command bridge of the stellar vanguard shuddered as another volley of enemy fire struck its failing shields. Admiral Vazen's crystalline fingers tightened around her command chair, her iridescent scales dulling with stress as emergency alerts flooded the holographic displays surrounding her. The pride of the Galactic Coalition's fleet, her flagship had led countless victories across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Now it was about to become her tomb. "Status report," she demanded, her voice carrying the authority that had made her legendary among the Coalition's 13 species. The Zentari tactical officer's tentacles wavered as he responded, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with anxiety. "Critical damage to all systems, Admiral. The Drachnid assault force has breached our outer defense line. The Coalition fleet." He hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're retreating." Vazen's inner eyelids flickered in disbelief as she watched the tactical display. One by one, the signatures of Coalition warships were disappearing, not destroyed, but jumping to hyperspace, abandoning her, abandoning the battle that meant everything. "Open a channel to Fleet Commander Ayrton," she ordered, her scales now shifting to a deep blue of rage. The communications officer, a spindly arachnid, worked his controls with multiple limbs before responding. "The fleet commander's vessel has already entered hyperspace, Admiral. They're all leaving." Vazen stood, her tall, elegant frame casting a shadow across the bridge. She had known this day might come. The Coalition's species valued strength above all else. It was why they had accepted her leadership in the first place. Her tactical brilliance, her unbroken string of victories, had earned their loyalty. But loyalty among the Coalition was always conditional on success. The ship rocked again, harder this time. The shield harmonics failed completely, and the first direct hits began tearing into the stellar vanguard's hull. Vazen watched as her crew, members of various species she had led for decades, began abandoning their posts. They had seen enough. Their admiral was defeated, and in their eyes, no longer worthy of their loyalty. "Admiral," her ship's AI interrupted, its voice maintaining artificial calm. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. Reactor containment failing. Impact with the moon's surface inevitable in approximately 6 minutes." Vazen moved to the tactical station, ignoring the retreating crew members. The Drachnid vessels, massive organic mechanical hybrids, were closing in for the kill. Below, a desolate moon awaited, barely habitable, with a thin atmosphere and harsh conditions. It would have to do. "Computer, seal off the bridge. Override all escape pod launches from this section." Her orders were clear and precise, even as the ship began its death spiral toward the moon's surface. She had led the Coalition fleet for 20 years. She would not be seen running from her defeat. As the stellar vanguard entered the moon's atmosphere, burning and breaking apart, Vazen reflected on the irony of her situation. She had always taught her subordinates that weakness was unacceptable, that failure meant abandonment. Now she was experiencing the harsh reality of those lessons firsthand. The impact was catastrophic. The bridge's inertial dampeners failed seconds before collision, throwing Vazen against the reinforced view screen. Her enhanced biology kept her alive, but she felt multiple bones shatter. As emergency lighting bathed the destroyed bridge in crimson, she dragged herself from the wreckage, every movement sending waves of agony through her body. Through the shattered view screen, she could see the Drachnid ships departing. They had no interest in confirming their kill. To them, and to her former allies, she was already dead. The Coalition would write her off as a casualty, her decades of service forgotten in light of this single defeat. Vazen activated her personal shield generator, one of the few pieces of technology still functioning, and began the arduous process of leaving her ruined flagship. The moon's thin atmosphere would support life, barely, but its temperature extremes and caustic storms would make survival challenging. As she emerged onto the twisted hull of her ship, she saw the scattered debris of her once mighty vessel stretching for kilometers across the barren landscape. She had led armies, commanded the most powerful fleet in known space, earned the fear and respect of a dozen alien races. Now she stood alone, injured and stranded, on a forgotten moon at the edge of disputed space. Her allies had abandoned her, her enemies thought her dead, and the principles she had lived by had turned against her. As the moon's harsh sun beat down on her iridescent scales, Vazin made a promise to herself. If she survived, she would remember this betrayal. She would remember how quickly loyalty turned to abandonment, how easily decades of leadership were forgotten. But first, she had to survive. The storm on the horizon grew larger as she began her journey across the barren surface, each step a reminder of her injuries. She didn't know then that her salvation would come from the most unexpected source, a species she had always considered beneath her notice, a species that would teach her that true strength came in forms she had never considered. The humans were coming, but Vazin didn't know that yet. All she knew was the pain of betrayal, the struggle for survival, and the harsh lesson that everything she had believed about power and loyalty was about to be challenged. Unexpected saviors. Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her brow as she studied the readouts on her tablet. The mining facility's sensors had picked up something unusual during the night cycle, a massive energy surge followed by impact tremors that had their seismic monitors screaming. As chief of operations for the Horizon Mining Corporation's outpost on this desolate moon, anything out of the ordinary was her problem. "What do you think, Marcus?" she asked her chief engineer, who was busy adjusting his environment suit's settings for the harsh surface conditions outside. Marcus Reynolds shrugged, his dark features creased with concern. "Could be a meteor strike, but those energy readings suggest something artificial. Military grade, if I had to guess." Sarah nodded, checking the atmospheric readings one final time. Their small crew of 8 wasn't equipped for search and rescue, but they couldn't ignore what might be survivors out there. This far from established trade routes, they were the only help available. "All right, prep the crawler. We'll take a team out to investigate." She keyed her comm unit. "Raj, Diego, suit up and meet us in the vehicle bay." Standard rescue loadout. The crawler's reinforced wheels crunched across the moon's rocky surface as they followed the energy signature. The facility grew smaller behind them, a collection of prefab structures that represented humanity's modest presence on this remote world. They had been here for 6 months, extracting rare minerals used in faster-than-light drive construction. It was unglamorous work, but it paid well. "Contact, 2 kilometers ahead," Raj called from the sensor station. "Large debris field. Definitely not natural." As they crested a ridge, the wreckage came into view. Sarah felt her breath catch. The scattered remains of what must have been an enormous vessel stretched across the landscape. The design was unmistakable. Coalition technology. "That's a coalition warship," Diego whispered, voicing what they all realized. "What's it doing out here?" Sarah brought the crawler to a stop at a safe distance. The coalition rarely ventured into this sector, considering it beneath their notice. They viewed human mining operations with thinly veiled disdain, tolerating them only because they needed the raw materials humanity provided. "Life signs?" she asked, already reaching for her rescue kit. Raj adjusted his instruments. "1. Very faint. About half a kilometer east of the main wreckage. Biosignature matches. Crystalline species. Probably command level, given the readings." Sarah felt her team's unease. Coalition command officers were notorious for their superiority complex, especially toward humans. But that didn't matter now. Someone needed help. They found Admiral Vazin collapsed in the shelter of a rock formation, her iridescent scales dulled with injury and exposure. Her elegant frame was broken, but her eyes still burned with fierce intensity as she watched the humans approach. "Stay back," she commanded weakly, attempting to raise some kind of personal shield. The device sputtered and died. Sarah stepped forward slowly, hands raised. "I'm Sarah Chen, Chief of Operations at the Horizon Mining Facility. We're here to help." Vazen's inner eyelids flickered with what might have been surprise or disgust. It was hard to tell with coalition species. Humans, she said, the word carrying years of ingrained contempt. I don't need help from primitives. Marcus moved to Sarah's side, medical scanner already running. Ma'am, with all due respect, you've got multiple fractures, severe internal injuries, and your environmental protection is failing. In this atmosphere, you've got maybe an hour before organ failure begins. The Admiral's scales shifted color slightly. Pain, Sarah guessed, though she wasn't familiar enough with the species to be certain. Where is the rest of my fleet? Surely they sent recovery teams. Sarah shared a look with her crew. They had all monitored the emergency channels, knowing what they would find. There's been no coalition traffic in this sector since the crash. No distress responses, no rescue attempts. The truth seemed to hit Vazen harder than her injuries. Her proud bearing faltered for just a moment, revealing something that looked almost like despair before her features hardened again. They abandoned me, she said, more to herself than the humans. As is our way. The defeated deserve no aid. Sarah knelt beside the injured admiral, ignoring the way Vazen tried to recoil from her proximity. That may be the coalition way, but it's not ours. We help people in need. It's what humans do. For a long moment, Vazen stared at Sarah, as if trying to detect some deception, some hidden motive. The concept of helping without expectation of reward seemed to genuinely confuse her. Why? She finally asked, her voice softer now. You owe me nothing. Less than nothing. I've supported policies that restricted human expansion, limited your trade rights. Sarah began unpacking medical supplies while Marcus ran more detailed scans. Because it's the right thing to do. Because out here, we're all just trying to survive. Coalition, human, whatever, none of that matters when someone's life is on the line. As they worked to stabilize her injuries, Vazen watched them with an expression that mixed confusion, suspicion, and something else. The first tiny crack in a worldview that had never considered humans worthy of notice. The storm that had been building on the horizon was getting closer. They needed to move soon, but Vazen's injuries made transport risky. Sarah could see the Admiral struggling with her pride, with the idea of accepting help from beings she considered inferior. Your facility, Vazen finally said, each word seeming to cost her something. How far? About an hour in the crawler, if we're careful with your injuries, Sarah replied. We have medical facilities. Basic by your standards, but enough to keep you alive until we can arrange proper care. The Admiral's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, twilight blue. Very well. I accept your assistance. As they carefully moved Vazen to the crawler, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what impact this proud coalition officer's presence would have on their small outpost. She had no way of knowing that this rescue would change not just Vazen's perspective on humanity, but the balance of power in this entire sector of space. The storm chased them back to the facility, its caustic winds beginning to howl. Behind them, the wreckage of the mighty coalition vessel slowly disappeared into the growing darkness, along with the Admiral's old certainties about strength, power, and the nature of species she had always considered beneath her. Learning humanity. 3 weeks in the human mining facility had changed Admiral Vazen more than 3 decades commanding the coalition fleet. She sat in the facility's makeshift medical bay, watching the humans go about their daily routines through the observation window, her analytical mind struggling to reconcile what she observed with everything she had believed about their species. The mining crew had converted their recreation room into a recovery ward for her, adapting their limited medical equipment to accommodate her crystalline biology. Their solutions were primitive by coalition standards: improvised atmospheric regulators, jury-rigged diagnostic equipment. But they worked. They always seemed to work, these human fixes that should have failed. Time for your checkup, Dr. Emily Santos announced, entering the room with her usual warm smile. The young physician had been monitoring Vazen's recovery, showing neither fear nor resentment toward a being who had once supported policies designed to limit human advancement. Vazen's scales shifted to acknowledge the doctor's presence. "Your treatments are surprisingly effective," she admitted, "though your methods are unorthodox." Emily chuckled as she checked the healing progress of Vazen's injuries. "That's kind of our specialty, making things work with what we have. Sarah calls it human ingenuity. I call it stubborn refusal to give up." Through the window, Vazen watched Sarah Chen coordinating the day's mining operations. The facility's chief ran her operation with an efficiency that would have impressed even coalition commanders, but her methods were entirely different from what Vazen knew. There were no threats, no demonstrations of dominance. Sarah led through respect and trust, consulting with her crew rather than simply issuing orders. When problems arose, she invited solutions from anyone, regardless of rank or position. It seemed chaotic, undisciplined, yet the results were undeniable. Keck online. "The crew had a better idea, so we tried it their way. You risk much, trusting your subordinates to such a degree." "They're not subordinates. They're my team." Sarah's voice carried conviction without arrogance. "Out here, we survive by trusting each other, by using everyone's strengths. Hierarchy has its place, but it shouldn't get in the way of good ideas." Vazen's scales rippled with thoughtful colors as she considered this. In the coalition, strength came from power, from the ability to command and enforce obedience. Yet these humans, with their primitive technology and collaborative approach, had achieved something her own people rarely managed: genuine loyalty. The facility's proximity alerts suddenly blared to life. Vazen's warrior instincts surged as she tried to rise, only to be held back by her healing injuries. Through the window, she watched the crew snap into action with practiced efficiency. Atmospheric disturbance, Raj reported from his station. Massive storm front approaching from the south. Category 5. Sarah was already moving. Time to impact. 2 hours. It's the biggest one we've seen since setting up here. Vazen knew what coalition protocol would demand. Abandon the outer facilities, retreat to the core structures, accept the losses. But she had learned enough about humans to know they would choose a different path. "We need to secure the external processors," Sarah announced. "If we lose those, we lose 3 months of work. Diego, Marcus, suit up. We're going out there." "The storm will reach lethal intensity," Vazen warned, her scales darkening with concern she didn't fully understand. "You risk your lives for machinery." Sarah paused at the door. "We risk our lives for each other, Admiral. Those processors represent months of everyone's hard work. We protect our own. Equipment, people, doesn't matter. It's what we do." Vazen watched as the crew donned their environmental suits, Sarah leading them out into the deteriorating conditions. They moved with purpose, without hesitation, each knowing their role in protecting what they had built together. Through the facility's external cameras, she observed their battle against the approaching storm. They worked with desperate efficiency, securing equipment, reinforcing shields, and improvising protective measures. Their actions defied logic, exposing themselves to danger for replaceable machinery. Yet Vazen found herself admiring their determination. As the storm's outer bands reached them, Sarah's voice crackled over the comm system, coordinating the final preparations. Vazen noticed something she had missed before. The humans were protecting more than just equipment. They were protecting their shared achievement, their community's work. In their actions, she glimpsed a kind of strength she had never considered valid. The strength of people united by something more than fear or dominance. The storm hit with savage force, but the facility held. The humans had done the impossible, protecting their operation through sheer determination and collaborative effort. As they returned, exhausted but triumphant, Vazen realized her perspective had shifted fundamentally. These humans, whom she had dismissed as primitive and weak, possessed a form of power the coalition had never understood. Their strength lay not in dominance or advanced technology, but in their ability to work together, to adapt, to face challenges with creativity and unwavering resolve. As she drifted into healing sleep that night, Vazen's mind wrestled with implications that went far beyond her own survival. The humans had shown her something that challenged the very foundations of coalition philosophy. But even as she grappled with these revelations, she had no way of knowing that their greatest test was still to come. The return of danger. The warning came during the facility's night cycle. Vazen was in the control room, her mostly healed body allowing her to assist with monitoring duties while the minimal night crew rested. She had insisted on contributing, much to the humans' surprise. Another change in her that would have shocked her former coalition allies. The sensors pinged, drawing her attention. Her scales paled as she recognized the signature. Drachnid vessels, the same ones that had shot down her flagship. They were approaching the moon with clear purpose. "Sarah," she called through the internal comm, her voice carrying an urgency that instantly roused the facility's chief from sleep. "We have incoming hostiles." Within minutes, the control room filled with the core crew, their efficiency unmarred by their hasty awakening. Vazen noted with approval how quickly they transitioned from sleep to alert status. Perhaps humans weren't as undisciplined as she had once believed. 3 Drachnid warships, Raj confirmed, his fingers dancing across the sensor controls. "Their trajectory suggests they detected our power signature. They'll be in weapons range in 2 hours. Sarah studied the tactical display, her expression grim. "They're not here for minerals. Admiral, are they looking for you?" Vazen's scales shifted to a deep blue of resignation. "The Drachnid never leave survivors. They must have detected my life signs." She straightened, her bearing once again that of a coalition commander. "I will surrender myself. Perhaps they will spare your facility." "Not happening," Sarah said firmly, surprising Vazen with the steel in her voice. "We don't sacrifice people, not even former enemies who once looked down on us." The Admiral stared at the human leader, genuine confusion coloring her scales. "You cannot hope to fight 3 Drachnid warships. Your facility has minimal defenses, no military-grade weapons." A slight smile played across Sarah's lips. "No, but we have something better. Human ingenuity and a lot of mining equipment that wasn't designed to be weaponized, but could be." Understanding dawned on Vazen as she watched the humans spring into action. Sarah began issuing rapid-fire orders, each crew member adding their own suggestions to an evolving plan. "Marcus, those excavation lasers, can we modify their focusing arrays? If we redline them, they could punch through standard shields. Won't last long, though." "Diego, the mineral processors." "Already on it. The electromagnetic separators could make one hell of a disruption field." "Raj, what about those seismic charges we never got approval to use? Buried in the right spots, they could create a resonance pattern that would play havoc with their sensors." Vazen watched in amazement as the humans transformed their mining facility into a makeshift fortress. Every piece of equipment was repurposed, every system adapted for defense. It was brilliant, unconventional, and exactly the kind of thinking that had always made humans so unpredictable. She found herself drawn into their planning, her centuries of military experience combining with their creative solutions. "The Drachnid rely heavily on organic technology," she offered. "Their neural networks are vulnerable to certain frequencies." Sarah's eyes lit up. "The sonic drilling equipment, we could retune it to target those frequencies." "Emily, how quickly can you analyze the Drachnid biological data from the Admiral's database?" As the preparations continued, Vazen realized she was witnessing something remarkable. These humans, with their limited resources and primitive technology, were preparing to face one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. Not out of pride or duty, but to protect someone who had once considered them inferior. The first Drachnid shots came exactly as predicted. The facility's shields, reinforced with repurposed mining field generators, held better than anyone expected. The counterattack began immediately. Retooled excavation lasers struck with surgical precision, their mining beams modified to penetrate military shields. Electromagnetic pulses from the mineral processors created chaos in the Drachnid's organic systems. seismic charges threw their targeting into disarray. Vazin stood in the control room, coordinating with Sarah, their different experiences creating a synergy neither had expected. The Admiral's tactical knowledge combined with human adaptability proved devastating. "Their lead ship is showing signs of mural disruption," Raj called out. "The sonic array is working." The battle raged for hours. The humans lost equipment, suffered damage, but refused to yield. Their improvised weapons shouldn't have worked against advanced military vessels, but they did because humans had never accepted the word impossible. When the Drachnid finally retreated, their organic ships damaged in ways their commanders had never anticipated, Vazin felt something she hadn't experienced since her own defeat: awe. "You did it," she said softly, watching the enemy signatures fade from their sensors. "You actually drove them off with mining equipment." Sarah, exhausted but triumphant, gave her a weary smile. "We did it. Together. That's the human way. We find solutions, we adapt, we survive, and we don't abandon our own." Looking at the celebrating crew, Vazin understood that she had become one of their own, not through power or fear, but through trust and shared purpose. The humans had shown her a kind of strength the Coalition had never imagined possible. As they began repairs, Vazin knew that this victory would have far-reaching consequences. The Drachnid would return, possibly with a larger force, but they would find more than a mining facility waiting for them. They would find humans and Coalition working together, combining military might with unconventional innovation. The galaxy was about to learn what Vazin had discovered. Underestimating humans was a mistake no one made twice. A new understanding. 3 months after the Drachnid attack, the Horizon mining facility had changed beyond recognition. What had once been a simple extraction operation now bristled with innovative defenses. Mining equipment permanently modified into weapons, sensors disguised as mineral processors, and shield generators that no Coalition engineer would have believed possible. But the greatest transformation wasn't in the facility's capabilities. It was in the being who now stood proudly beside Sarah Chen, watching Coalition ships descend from orbit. "They actually came," Sarah mused, glancing at Vazin. "Your message got through." The Admiral's scales rippled with what the humans now recognized as amusement. "Of course they came. The Coalition cannot ignore reports of humans defeating Drachnid warships, though I suspect they believe the reports are exaggerated." The Coalition delegation that emerged from their shuttles represented the highest levels of command. Vazin's former peers, come to investigate claims they had initially dismissed as impossible. Their shock at finding her not only alive but standing as an equal beside humans was evident in their color-shifting scales. "Admiral Vazin," Fleet Commander Tyerton began, his tone carrying forced politeness, "your survival is unexpected. These humans claim they drove off a Drachnid battle group. They did more than that." Vazin replied, her voice carrying an authority that had evolved beyond her old Coalition command tone. "They showed us all, what true strength looks like." She led the delegation through the facility, watching their reactions as Sarah and her crew demonstrated their innovations. The Coalition officers' dismissive attitudes gradually gave way to disbelief, then reluctant admiration. "Impossible," one commander muttered, watching a demonstration of their modified mining lasers. "Their technology is primitive. They shouldn't be able to." "That's exactly what I used to think," Vazin interrupted. "I was wrong. Humans don't accept limitations. They don't see technology as advanced or primitive. They see possibilities. While we waited for perfect solutions, they created imperfect ones that worked." The tour culminated in the control room, where Raj had prepared a full tactical analysis of the battle. The Coalition officers watched in stunned silence as the footage showed their improvised defenses overwhelming Drachnid technology that had been considered superior in every way. "This changes everything," Tyerton finally admitted, his scales showing colors of deep thought. "The Drachnid have been our greatest threat, and humans with mining equipment defeated them using methods we never considered. Because you never considered humans worth considering, Vazin stated firmly. You saw their shorter lifespans, their limited technology, their emotional decisions, and assumed weakness. I made the same mistake, but their strength isn't in their technology or their resources. It's in here. She gestured to her head, then to her heart, a very human gesture she had adopted. They think differently. They feel differently. They turn weaknesses into strengths. Sarah stepped forward, her presence somehow matching the coalition officers despite her smaller stature. We're offering an alliance, she said, not as subordinates, not as inferior beings requiring guidance, but as equals. Your military might combine with our adaptability. Your technology merged with our innovation. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Vazin watched her former peers struggling with centuries of prejudice, just as she had done. But they were military strategists. They couldn't deny the evidence before them. The Drachnid will return, Exarton said slowly. They always do, with greater numbers. Let them come, Vazin replied, her scales gleaming with confidence. They'll find something they've never faced before. Coalition and humans fighting as one. But more importantly, they'll face humans who have access to coalition technology and the creativity to use it in ways we never imagined. The agreement that followed wasn't just a military alliance. It was a fundamental shift in galactic politics. The coalition, for the first time in its history, acknowledged humans as full equals. Training exchanges were established. Technology was shared, and most importantly, perspectives were broadened on both sides. Months later, Vazin stood in the facility's observation dome, watching human and coalition ships conducting joint exercises in orbit. Sarah joined her, both of them reflecting on how much had changed. You know, Sarah said, when we found you that day, I never imagined it would lead to all this. Vazin's scales shifted through colors of contentment. When you found me, I believed strength came from power, from dominance, from advanced technology. You humans taught me it comes from something else entirely, from trust, from creativity, from refusing to accept defeat, and from being willing to help someone in need, even when they might not deserve it. Sarah added with a smile. Especially then, Vazin agreed. The coalition taught me how to command. Humans taught me how to lead. There's a difference. Above them, a coalition cruiser executed a maneuver that would have been impossible before human engineers suggested modifications to its drive systems. Nearby, a human ship demonstrated defensive capabilities that merged coalition shield technology with human ingenuity. The Drachnid are massing on the border, Sarah noted. Intelligence suggests they're planning something big. Vazin's scales rippled with anticipation rather than fear. Let them come. They'll find something they never expected. Humans and coalition united, combining the best of both our species. They thought they defeated me that day. But instead, they set in motion something far greater than victory or defeat. They helped us find each other, Sarah finished. Indeed, Vazin agreed, watching the ships above continue their dance of cooperation and shared purpose. And in doing so, they helped us discover a truth the galaxy wasn't ready for. That true strength lies not in standing alone in our power, but in standing together in our differences. The facility's lights gleamed against Vazin's scales, now permanently shifted to include patterns that reflected her time with humans, a visible symbol of how much she had changed, how much they had all changed. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. For in the end, the greatest victory wasn't over the Drachnid or any external threat. It was the victory over prejudice, over limiting beliefs, over the idea that any species was inherently superior or inferior. It was the understanding that true power came not from dominance, but from unity, a lesson that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come.